I remember the first song I tried to learn was what was it? If there's anything that you want, from me to you, the Beatles, and it was E minor to G, and I just couldn't play it. I couldn't move fast enough to play those chords, and I actually remember thinking that it must be a trick. That actually nobody can really play the guitar. It's just a trick. They do it all in the studio somehow. So I was very frustrated. I have a very short attention span, and if I can't do something in 5 minutes, I don't want to do it.
This is Rob Ruckus.
Hey, this is Kate Clover.
Hey guys, it's Nick Collins here from The Effect and Better Strangers.
Hi, my name is Madeline Rose.
Hey, it's Ben McKelvey.
It's Tim Howard here from Mike and the Mechanics.
Hello, I'm Amanda Lehman.
I'm Billy Harvey.
What's going on, everybody? I'm Casey Sampson from the band Twist Stop.
Hey, it's Tony from Fastball.
Hello, everybody. My name is Isaiah Mitchell.
Hey guys, it's Matt here from the White Lakes.
You're listening to Almost Famous Magazine.
Come join us for this interview. Check it out, Almost Famous Magazine.
Hello and welcome back to The Hang right here on Almost Famous Magazine. Thank you to everyone who joins us for these incredible conversations, subscribes, shares our channel. We really appreciate it, and you do a lot to help support these artists that we talk to. Today, I'm honored to be hanging with the legendary Simon Scardanelli, who's been has an extensive career and very eclectic, from his chart-topping days back with Big Bam Boom to his recent ventures into musical theater and environmental storytelling. He has spanned genres. He has spanned sounds. This is going to be an exciting conversation. Today, we're going to dive into his musical origins, upcoming release, Underneath the Singing Tree, his recent single, Battleships, and so much more. So, Simon, thank you so much for joining me on The Hang.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. We'd love to start these conversations off with your musical origin story, because I think it's always fascinating. Did you find music, or did music find you? What was the genesis of your original spark, and how it got you to where you are today?
Golly, and I hadn't really thought too much about that. Nobody's actually put it that way before, but just thinking as you were talking there about that, I thought, my earliest memory is telling my mother when Khachaturian saber dance came on the radio, and I would have been about 5, and I said to her, "Someone's stolen my tune." I thought I had written it, and so I'd heard it somewhere before, but I heard it on the radio, and I was convinced that someone had been delving into my head and stealing the music. So music was always really in my head. I was composing, I think, in my head quite early, but the first real composition, the first songwriting, started when I was about 10. And of course, that was in 1963. I was 10. The Beatles had just exploded along with the whole Liverpool scene, and my head was full of all this wonderful pop music. And so I formed a little group with a friend of mine. We didn't have any instruments. We couldn't play any instruments. So we had cardboard cutout guitars, and we used to meet up in the lunchtime in school and play these cardboard guitars. And I wrote all these songs, and I actually typed them out on my dad's typewriter. And for some reason, I had the idea of copyright, and my dad had this paper that had a sort of watermark of copy, meaning it was a copy, for carbon copy. But I thought that meant my songs were protected. So, and I still have those pieces of paper, actually. So I wrote these songs in this kind of 60s pop, bouncy love song, pop song thing. And yeah, that was the start of it, And then I didn't start playing guitar till I was about 15.
So what that 5-year gap, you were fed by that lyric, that driving yourself through writing lyric. What was it like finally to be able, to decide you're going to pick up an instrument and learn the craft of the musicality to put the sound to the music you've written?
Well, it didn't go plain sailing, actually, because I remember the first song I tried to learn was, what was it? If there's anything that you want, from me to you, the Beatles. And it was E minor to G, and I just couldn't play it. I couldn't move fast enough to play those chords. And I actually remember thinking that it must be a trick, that actually nobody can really play the guitar. It's just a trick. They do it all in the studio somehow. So I was very frustrated. I have a very short attention span, and if I can't do something in 5 minutes, I don't want to do it. So I struggled for quite some time with the guitar until I I guess I reached a threshold of, oh, actually, this is starting to sound okay. And then it started to continue from there. Yeah.
What was that aha moment like for you when you're like, wait a minute, now I get it?
I don't know. I don't know that there was one actually. I think it was just a gradual improvement. I suppose the aha moment really came in a career thing because when I was 16, I guess I've been playing 18 months or something. I put a little improv rock band together and we just made a terrible racket. And then in the local newspaper, there was an advert for a lead guitarist for a band, and I thought, well, I might as well apply. And I had no idea. I didn't know how good I was or how bad I was for that matter. But I got the job in this covers band that were really hard-working guys. They'd all been in bands before. And it was like an apprenticeship. They were a lot older than me, or a few years older than me. And they'd played the clubs up and down the country. They'd had various record deals. So I just lucked out, really, because my very first professional band at 16 and a half was, we played 4 nights a week. At Christmas and holidays, we played 3 times a night in 3 different hotels in this big town I lived in at the time. So I was thrown in at the deep end from being in this sort of prog rock, make it up as you go along band to suddenly having to learn every song that was in the charts. And sometimes we'd learn 3 or 4 new songs a week to be on a Monday or a Tuesday to be played on the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday because they just come into the chart. So it was a great training ground for me. So I think that was the aha moment. I guess I thought, oh, I can do this and I can make a living,
That you bring up an interesting thing that I want to delve into a little bit. I mean, you took a huge risk on yourself because you just even said you may or may not have been qualified for that gig, but it seems like you went in with a lack of sense of fear. Like, are you one of those fearless individuals who's like, I'm just going to jump into anything and I'll figure out how to get it right?
I think that's an interesting question. I think it depends what bit of my life it applies to. I've done some stupid, crazy things. And I dive into things without thinking, for sure. But there is fear, and there has been fear in my life for many other areas of life. But certainly in terms of, I never thought of it as career or anything like that. I just thought of it as what I wanted to do. And I wanted to play music. And, I surprised my family, I think, when I suddenly found myself in a professional band. I was able to stop the job I'd had not very long, but wasn't enjoying selling TVs in the store, and I was able to quit that and was earning good money. And sure, when I got bored with that, and I get bored with things very quickly, I think I lasted maybe nearly 2 years or less than 2 years, 18 months. And I got bored and just I just quit and I went off and did something completely different. I went and lived on a campsite and worked on a building site where I met some other people. And then I became a sort of hippie musician and went and lived in a caravan in a field and smoked a lot of pot and wrote imaginary rock operas that never got finished and so on, So yeah, I just I have enough of something. I don't know what I'm going to do next, but I do it. And then I find out what it is,
That's interesting to me because you've had a career that's you started, you just mentioned your first song that you learned was a Beatles song. Then you mentioned, kind of in a proggy kind of band, learning songs every week. And then you've been in pop and all these different genres. Is it because of that you get into something and then you move on quickly because you've either mastered it or get bored with it? Like, what has led you to constantly be kind of that reinvention of yourself into the different genres?
I think it's just, well, it's a twin-edged sword, really, because I was never a big fan of one type of music. Even when I was playing in that covers band in the early 70s, and I had friends, we were smoking pot as everybody did in those days. And so my friends on a Saturday morning a lot of people worked in the hotel trade, and they had this big room we could use to have jam sessions in. So before my gig in the evening, I'd go for a jam session, and they would all play like the blues, the sort of chunky blues stuff. And it never sat well with me, and it was a big thing. Everyone was playing the blues. And I guess I just grew up with the music that I grew up with in my house was very influential, I suppose. My mother listened to musical theater, Oklahoma, A West Side Story. I grew up with that ringing. My dad listened to classical music. but very classical, not modern contemporary, but very sort of fairly boring stuff actually, but big stuff, Tchaikovsky, Beethoven, all the usuals. And then on top of that, there was the radio, which was pumping out pop music and jazz. And I don't know, I was just influenced by so many musical genres that I couldn't see the point in sticking to one thing. And so even some of my very early recordings, the influences are bizarre. When I look back, there's an album I did in 1980 in Germany, a solo album, which I not so long ago released on iTunes and stuff. And I listened to that, and it's sort of, pseudo classical prog rock, but then it's got some high pop with loads of harmonies. And so for me, it was always a problem. And I think that's been a problem for a lot of my career, is that people don't actually know where to put me. And people in marketing love to put you in a box. They have to, and I understand that. But it's been very difficult for me to actually fit in that box. So yeah, and maybe now after all this time, you just accept that you have your own box. It's not particularly even in shape. It's got funny corners and maybe bits flying off it. But that's the box I'm in now.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think that artists need to be is more diversified, I think, than ever, because with the proliferation of so much available content, which unfortunately music, film, art has now just been moved into this little content piece, you have to be able to engage more people in their space, and that takes I think it takes that larger ability to cross over in genres and not just be in that singular box. Because now you go from a point where, in the 70s, you put out a record. I couldn't get a lot of British records in the States, or they'd show up here 6 months later, right? Now your distribution, you hit a button and the world sees what you have.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a little crazy. Let's jump ahead a little bit, because I mean, I think you were in your 30s, early 30s, maybe mid 30s. You relocated from the UK to New York. How did that come about, and what kind of influence did New York have on you and your music?
Well, firstly, New York had a huge influence on me, but there are two sort of American periods in my career. The first was in '82 when I moved. Well, I actually went on a hitchhiking tour of America and ended up in Los Angeles and lived in Los Angeles for several months. I was actually an extra in Spinal Tap, which is a fun thing to have been. Unfortunately, I have studied that film from top to toe, and I can't see me in it. I'm in the theatre scene where he's stuck in the pod. And I remember Rob Reiner was running up the aisle of the theatre. It was in downtown LA, with the camera, and they were filming, and he was telling everyone to do this stuff. And I remember the group of people I was with. It's strange how you kind of remember things, and I remember exactly who I was with. And it's very funny because when I did watch the film eventually, I can see the people a few rows in front of me, and then it's gone, and it's like, my moment is gone. So I was in LA in '82, and I guess I spent 6-7 months there trying to get gigs. Did not very successfully, really. Then I ended up going back to the UK, but then I came back to the States in end of '88 and '89, 1989, not to live but to tour, because my band Big Bamboo, it was a duo with a Canadian guy called Shark. We got signed to MCA Records, and they did the whole number on us. We had a number 17 AOR hit. We toured with Todd Rundgren. We toured with They Might Be Giants, I think. We did a few gigs with a couple of bands and so on. So we were backwards and forwards to the States from the UK for most of '89. And then it all went sort of pear-shaped with the label for a while, and we realized they weren't going to make our second album unless we put a rocket under them. And our A&R man had moved to New York, and we knew we just weren't going to get it done. So we took the decision to move to New York and put a rocket under his ass and say, let's get our album made. So I did that. I sort of I had a house in East London. I rented it out, sold everything I had, and got off to New York and rented an apartment with the help of the label. And 2 weeks after we arrived, the A&R guy left, So he was our only champion in the company by this time, because the first album, they'd all thought it was going to sell bucket loads. It didn't. They screwed out. There's lots of stories about that. Usual record company rubbish. So then there we are in New York, and suddenly our A&R guys left. So they assigned us a new person. We had a meeting, and I knew immediately that if we didn't say yes to whatever she proposed, we'd be sunk. We'd be without a deal. So, she suggested a producer. We'd been talking to all these great people who wanted to do it but weren't available. And so we just said, yeah, let's do it. And we made the record with Alan Shacklock, which, it was fine. But then at the end of the record, we got dropped anyway because MCA got bought by some conglomerate. So we were left in New York at the end of 91 with a finished album. Fortunately, we knew things were going bad because our money dried up on the last couple of weeks of recording. Our manager phoned and said, I've got bad news. There's no money going into your account. And then a little bit later, I got even worse news. They're going to drop you. So I stole the masters from the studio, which was a very smart thing to do. I stole the mixes, not the multi-tracks. And that was that. And we got dropped, and I ended up working in an after-hours club in New York, which was an amazing experience. Save the Robots, which is legendary if you were ever clubbing in New York. And I worked there for 2.5 years or so, and lived in the underworld, the demi-monde of New York. I lived in the Lower East Side, 4th and D, which at that time was just about as east as you'd want to go, because you've got the projects next door and then the East River. And now I believe it's pretty shishy around there, but then it was pretty bad. But you fit in, you manage, you survive, and New York was very influential. I had a lot. Well, everybody I knew was an artist or a painter or a sculptor, a musician or a playwright or whatever, and we just had so much fun making stuff. I did installation music for galleries. I did performance art with my then wife. Plus, I did gigs solo. The Big Bamboo broke up at the end of that year, 91. After the deal fell through, we kind of went our separate ways. But I loved New York. It was my home until end of 94. So nearly 4 years there.
I'm surprised we didn't run into each other. Those were my years at MTV, and then I was managing a band in 90, 91, 92. So I'm kind of surprised we didn't run into each other.
Which band were you running? Which band were you running?
So I made the mistake of taking a kind of a version. They were called Avalon, and they were kind of in that progressive metal space. Okay. The problem was, we drove across the George Washington Bridge, and every A&R guy flew to Seattle for grunge.
Of course,
and during those 4 year period, nobody in New York got signed. Nobody. Everybody got signed in Seattle. Yeah. Nobody got signed in New York. So
that's right.
The last.
Yeah, well, we must have been the same clubs. I mean, there was a healthy scene going on. My friend Rory, the drummer from Thorn, who went on to play with the singer from, I can't remember the name now, but lots of great music, lots of great clubs at that time. New York was a great time in the early 90s. It wasn't too criminalized, but it was still dangerous and edgy. So it was a great time.
Oh yeah, no, it was fabulous, and some of the most bizarre stories I think I have in my entire life came out of being in clubs. So
absolutely, yeah.
So I'm surprised we didn't run into one another, but we're here now. And I want to delve into a bit about your new upcoming release, which is Underneath the Singing Tree. Yeah. I'd love to spend 4 hours talking about every other release that you have on Bandcamp and on iTunes, but we don't have that kind of time together. But how did Underneath the Singing Tree come around, and what was your creative process around the album?
Okay, so I had finished an album in 2019. I moved to Brittany in France at the end of 2017, and it really inspired me. It's a very artistic culture, artsy culture, lots of tradition. But it's not traditional in a rigid sense. You'll go and see a band and there'll be a mixture of traditional Breton music with punk and hip hop. It's like you couldn't get much more eclectic. They're very open-minded here. And so when I came here, I was very surprised that the audiences, the French audiences, were very open to my songs. They didn't understand most of the lyrics, but somehow something I did resonated with them, and they opened their arms to me, and I felt very, very comfortable here. So I decided to stay permanently, and thus ended my third marriage, as it were, because she was staying in England. So that was the first thing. And so I did an album in 2019, which is very kind of, I describe it as slightly psychedelic folk. It's quite calm. It's called The Rock, the Sea, the Rising Tide. And it had a maritime theme, but it's quite sort of imaginary, a lot of it. So that had been not a great, I mean, none of my records are commercially successful, but it wasn't an album that was going to get me gigs. It wasn't an album that was sort of people were talking about, but it was an album I was very proud of. So I didn't quite know what to do next. But at the end of that period, I had got into this maritime theme. And there came the idea for this huge project, which I'm still working on, I hope to launch this year, called La Mer, which is a sort of ecological climate change battle of the races on the planet Earth. And that sort of took over for a few years as being the main vehicle of writing. But in that, I was still doing gigs, and I'd taken one of the songs from that stuff, which I've just had as a single, Battleships. And I was doing that live, and it was going down great. People were loving it. And then I was in the middle of a divorce, and then the divorce happened, and I was single, and I was kind of officially back on the market. I'm being very open here about this. And I thought, oh, okay, let's join a dating site, let's get out there again and see if there's anybody out there. And I just had this very, very weird relationship with someone who turned out to be extremely, I think a narcissist or whatever. But it really was the first relationship I'd had with anybody for a long time, having been married for whatever it was, 10 years. So suddenly my emotions were all heightened again, and my senses were all heightened again. And I started writing, and I wrote Underneath the Singing Tree as a kind of a joke version of the relationship. We had met in this magical forest, and there were lots of magical places in Brittany, but this particular forest in Huelguet, it really is like walking into the Hobbit. There's rocks and streams, and you swear you just saw some elves running past, And that was where we met, the first meeting we met on a dating site. And so when it all started to go a bit strange, I wrote the lyrics for that. But it was kind of a poking fun at myself, and it's not serious. But then more songs came, and I guess, as always, I write maybe 30 or 40 song ideas and then end up with just 10. So a lot of it just gets thrown away, and it's too not whatever, it doesn't fit. And I don't know, I started to develop a sound for the album that I was really enjoying, and there are kind of almost Latin influences. I've got trumpet on 4 tracks, there's flute on a few tracks. Ukulele is quite a big part of my repertoire now. I love the ukulele, and so I don't know. I just started when I put an album together. I like to think of it as one complete document in time, as it were. So everything has to fit together thematically in some way, and somehow. Once I'd got Singing Tree was written, Everything's Gonna Be Fine was written. Battleships I wasn't originally going to put on the album, but because of the live thing, I thought I would. And what other song did I write at that point? 5 Seconds Ago last year. So I had like 3 or 4 songs that were the core. And once I had those, I just started working around other ideas that I was playing with and seeing which ones fit and which ones don't fit. And I don't know, it's just a process of, it's slow and painful for me. It really takes far too long. I lose interest in my own work. I play that's rubbish. And then I go back to it a week later and I think, maybe it's not rubbish. And then sitting down, actually recording and getting down to it, that's the hardest part for me. It's easy for me to sit down with the guitar and knock off a melody and a few lines of text and so on. But then the hard part is to sit down and craft it into something finished, So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, you brought up something that I think would be I don't think I've ever asked on this type of conversation before, but I went to film school. I'm a photographer, and I have learned in my life that the pieces that I do that I love the most, people kind of so.
Yeah.
The things that I think are garbage,
people
love.
Yeah.
I mean, is that something that you experience as well?
Well, yes, I do experience that because I wrote a song in between when I was trying to write the album. I also came up with another strange experience with a kind of a woman who was bizarre, lived in a forest. I mean, you couldn't write it. You couldn't make this up. You know, it's a great story. And she invited me to the Halloween dinner in her forest side cottage in the middle of nowhere in the forest. And I wrote this. She asked me to show her some ukulele things, and I did this little thing. And she said, "Well, when you get home, could you make a loop of it so I can sing to it?" And I said, "Sure." I got home and I started playing it, and I completely forgot what I was doing, and I wrote a song instead. And I sent her the song, and I love the song. It's called "Under the Cover of Snow," and it's surreal, of course, and it's weird maybe. And I played it to a few of my friends, and they went, "What the fuck is that? You know, what is that, Simon?" You know, and I said, "Well, it's a song. You know, does it have to be anything? It's just a song." And so I thought, I'm going to release it. And that was more out of being contrary than anything else. I thought, well, I love this song. I think musically and lyrically it's very interesting. So I released it as a single. But it's interesting, that point you make there about people liking the stuff that you underrate yourself, and the things that you really love, they don't get. And I think with the new album, I've been pleasantly surprised, because there's a couple of tunes on there that I thought no one's going to really get this. And when people that I don't know get something that I think they won't get, that really works. I mean, I like that, you know. And I have been sending out copies of the album, obviously, to people, radio people and various things, and also thinking about getting someone on board to promote it and asking them, well, which songs really hit you, you know. And I was surprised at the number of people that came back with that 5 seconds ago last year as a choice of song. And also there's a song on there called Driftwood, which is very, very personal, very, very quiet. But again, I'm very happy with it. And it's very sort of bare. And again, a lot of people have said to me, "Oh, really like that song, you know, wow." And I kind of go, I'm interested why you like that song, because I don't think most people would understand it. Maybe they do, I don't know. But so sometimes you get a surprise and people like the things that you like. And that is a surprise, and it's nice. But yeah, for sure, I've written things that I think are masterpieces, and they go, nah. I wrote a song about New York on the last album called Requiem for the City of New York. And it's a metaphor. It's a woman sitting in a bar with, you know, bright lipstick and pearls, and she represents a fading glamour of New York. I think it's a masterpiece, you know, but nobody's actually said that to me, you know, but I think it's a great song. And I did a gig in a casino earlier this year, and I was able to play that song there because it's slightly jazzy, and actually went pretty well in there. But
yeah, I've always been amazed that, you know, I'm like, oh my God, this is my opus. This is the greatest thing I've ever done. And then people are like, big deal. Let's get back to the album real quick. I haven't heard it all, but I have heard Battleships. I got a very kind of Pirates of the Caribbean kind of vibe off of it. And like, I was waiting for Johnny Depp to show up in the video, right?
You've seen the video, right? You've seen the video?
Yeah. Is the entire album kind of, because you said something earlier about, and I think this is a bit of a lost art, to be honest with you. When you create, you want to tie it all together, and you want an arc, right?
Yeah.
That may come from your proggy roots, because those, you know, if you go back to Yes and Genesis and even Rush and those like that. And I love that style of album making where it's a thought from beginning to end. Does this album really have kind of that, you know, that kind of Pirates of the Caribbean kind of swashbuckling?
No, it doesn't. And it's strange because Battleships, I say, is part of La Mer, and it wasn't intended to go on this album. But I have a song called Here We Go Again, which is a ukulele, which couldn't be more different. I mean, it's absolutely a completely different type of thing. Somehow it worked with that. And I was just, I guess the idea of, you know, the document in time, and it has to have a theme, but that theme may not be obvious, I think. And maybe for me, I really struggled when I was choosing the songs to put together. And I have a friend in the UK who's always been a good sort of barometer that I bounce things off. And I said, you know, I think I've got the collection, but really it shouldn't work, because I've got this one song with a flute and a sort of aggressive folk rock at the start. Then it goes into something with a trumpet, slightly Latin feel. And then it goes to this. And then there's this, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I said, but I think it actually fits together. And the song order is always so important on an album. Well, it is for me. And I sent it to him, and he said, I couldn't reorder the songs. It works great as it is. So maybe I just got lucky. I think the thematic part of this album is less obvious, perhaps, than previous albums. I think the fact is that the songs do fit together. As always, I'm very lyrical. I tell stories. I like to play with words, and I hate cliche. So I'm always kicking myself to try and find something new to say. And maybe that's what holds it together. I don't know. I mean, it's still, I haven't actually had any reviews yet, so I haven't had an outsider's opinion of it as an album. I may be wrong. It could be that I go, weird collection of songs. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm looking forward to hearing the entire thing, and it's interesting that you mentioned, you've been leaning toward these environmental things and conservation and the earth and all these things. So I'm interested in hearing more than just just battleships and seeing where that journey takes me. So I'm looking forward to it. A lot of people watching could be new to you as an audience and new to your music. And kind of going back to that idea of, things you create that you love that people hate and vice versa. You have a very large catalog. You've been at this a while. I always like to find out, and these don't have to be your singles, but if I was new to you, just as a new audience, I stumble across you somewhere, what are 2 or 3 of songs that are in your catalog, your entire catalog, that you feel really define you as a songwriter and performer that should be like that appetizer to get people to come for the meal?
Yeah. That's an interesting question. And just off the top of my head, and I think that the styles will differ, but in terms of the craft of songwriting and why it means so much to me to make a great song and put it in a nice vehicle, if you like, arrangement-wise, musicianship-wise. So I pick a song that keeps coming back to haunt me almost. I've just put it back in the set. I'm working in a duo at the moment with a female, Sophie, who plays flute and accordion. And she fell in love with this song and said, why didn't we sing this song live? I said, well, we don't need to. We've got plenty, Anyway, it's a song called The Valentines, and it's on the album I did in 2007. The album's called That Dangerous Sparkle. And it's The Valentines, and it's actually the story of me moving to New York with my then new bride. And literally, it's autobiographical. It starts with, they met in October. By Valentine's Day, they were wed. Perfectly suited in madness, to New York they fled. And to the Lower East Side, blah, blah, blah. But it is I love that song. It's a good song, and the production and the musicianship is great. Then I think another song I'd point to, which perhaps would give people an idea of my quirkiness and my sense of adventure and fun in songwriting, because it should also be that. And that's a song called Wild Flowers, which is on a 2011 album I did called Dark Dog Days. And that's a story, and I do that live in my set now, and it's really good fun. And that's a story about a guy who goes to a party and meets a beautiful woman who turns out to be a vampire. So, and he sort of said, this is kind of not what I bargained for, life forever and ever. But so it's kind of funny. I think it's amusing and it's clever, but it's not clever. I think it's just a nice piece of writing. And I did a real blockbuster chorus thing on it, and so the production's fun. And then maybe one more, which would give a different view, would probably be something from the 2016 album, Make Us Happy. Maybe Hope's in My Pocket from that one, which has got me more back. That album, 2016, kind of brought me more back to my roots of acoustic rock, which is where I've been mostly since then. I still can't, I can't turn down a genre. If I like it, if I want to play it, I'm going to play it, But I guess because of the way I'm gigging at the moment without a full band, mostly in duo, sometimes trio. So it's acoustic guitar, ukulele, accordion, flute, and sometimes percussion. So that's 3 songs I think would give you a pretty good idea. And if you didn't like me after those 3 songs, then you might as well forget it. You're not going to get it, But there's so many other songs that I would want people to hear. I would want people to listen to the weird stuff and say, listen 3 times and listen to the lyrics. A lot of people don't listen to lyrics, and that's fine. But for me, lyrics are very, very important. And,
Well, and I think if you are truly someone who appreciates the someone who puts the effort, energy, and focus into what they're saying in their music, you'll really enjoy Simon's music. I mean, those of us who are lyric aficionados and appreciate that, you're gonna enjoy it. I'm gonna make sure that all the links to his catalog are down below. You'll be able to go out and buy the music and really enjoy it. With the album coming out kind of early summerish, what does the rest of 2025 have in store for you?
So this album, Underneath the Singing Tree, will be out mid-June, I think, or end of June. And I've got 2 projects on the go. Obviously, I'm playing live a lot, and the summer over here is just crazy. So from the middle of June onwards, I think we've got 35, 40 concert dates in the book just till the end of August, So that's looking crazy. I mean, we've 5 in a week in some weeks in July. So I'm going to be very full with that. Not going to get a lot of recording done. But the next 2 recording projects are one, La Mer, which is from which Battleships comes. And that is a huge project, and I promised myself I'd finish it this year. I was going to do a premiere at the Prague Fringe, or possibly up in Sweden this year. It didn't happen. I'm definitely going to bring the show live next year. And the show is unusual. So the reason it's taken so long is because it's on such a big scale. I kind of had 12 musicians on stage, an actor, a movie screen behind me, and me in the middle. And I've cut it right down now to me playing to backing tracks with a video behind me. And there's a narration. It's a bit like sort of War of the Worlds, the way that was set. I don't know if you remember Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds. You have an actor telling the story, and you have music. That's what the Mayor is kind of like. And the acting, the dialogue in English, I'll be doing the narration on the screen, and I'm going to do it in different languages. So I've already got the French version, and the German version is coming, and so on. So that I've got to finish recording, and that's about an hour and 20 minutes of recording. But at the same time, I'm doing an album with Sophie. We do a duo thing called Scardinelli and Sophie. We've got lots of work. So we're going to do an album of fairly stripped down. There will be percussion. I'll put some bass on it, but it won't be a big production number. It'll be a very live feeling album. And funny enough, that'll contain songs that are in our live show that are from various albums. So we're going to do a version of Big Bamboo Shooting From My Heart, which was a hit in America. We do a fantastic different version of that live. We're going to do Wildflowers from my Dark Dog Days album, which has got a kind of Cajun feel instead of what's on the record. We're going to do another Big Bamboo song, Wicked Love, which is what we finish our set with. And we're going to do a couple of new songs that I've written just for the duo. So that's going to be a different kind of vibe. It's going to be quite an energy album. There'll be a couple of slower things on there, but basically it's people that come and see us live. We rock the place, people dance, blah, blah, blah. So it's going to be an album of that kind of feel. And then I don't know what else.
Well, I mean, being a Beatles fan, tomorrow never knows, right? So,
yeah.
So well, that's fabulous. I mean, I haven't been to France in a while. Maybe I should get over it. I mean, are you exclusively performing in France? Where can people find you in these summer performances?
Well, my concerts are always listed on my website, songman.org, and on Spotify too. They do show up on there, although that I think might be restricted if you're not in the area. At the moment, yes, I'm just playing in France. I just did 2 concerts in the UK last week or 2 weeks ago. There may be a possibility of more concerts over there. I was looking at coming over to America to do some shows, but the new regime with the visas and things, it's really hard. Artists are turning away from playing in the States because the uncertainty is too much. Nobody can guarantee you're going to get through immigration. So I wanted to come over and promote the record, but unfortunately I didn't think that's going to happen just yet. So we're playing all over Brittany and in Paris. And in fact, I'm off on a road trip tomorrow to go and sort of scout some more shows further south. I'm actually going to go busking and sleep in a tent and just turn up in bars and play and see what happens, looking for places to play. So at the moment, it's just France, I'm afraid, yeah.
Well, if you're in France, don't miss out on an opportunity to see Simon. I totally understand why you're not coming to the States. I mean, we here at Almost Famous covered punk rock bowling this year, and artists like the Baboon show were not able to make it because their government said, "Hey, we're not sure you can either get in or come home." And it's a challenging time for sure.
It is.
You know, one of the things, and this should be, I think it'll be a fascinating a response, because you've had a long, illustrious career, and you've worked with a lot of people. But we like to spread opportunity, and because you never know who's watching. Yeah. If you had the chance to get in a studio with one other artist to be creative for a day, who would it be, and why them?
Chappell Roan. I don't listen and keep up with a lot of what's going on. I try, you know, when something breaks big, and I eventually say, okay, I'll see what the fuss is all about. And usually I'm really disappointed, you know. And I won't name any names of the people that have disappointed me, but really a lot of the artists that are selling bucket loads of whatever it is don't excite me. They just don't do anything for me. And I heard Chappell Roan being talked about, and I don't listen to radio. Certainly I don't listen to mainstream radio here, so I wouldn't hear it there. So I just went on Spotify, and I just thought, wow, I love this. This is great. And I watched a couple of videos, and I mean, I couldn't name you any tracks, but I like the attitude, and I like the musical collisions that seem to be going on there. So that's the first new thing I've heard recently that made me think, wow, yeah, I wouldn't mind hearing more of that. And when you ask that question, I think, yeah, actually, that would be a fun studio day, you know.
Absolutely. And now we've put it out there, so you never know who's watching. If anyone is connected to her, you need to make a connection with Simon. I mean, we've got to do good things, and you never know how creative that could be. So I think that would be fabulous. Yeah. Everyone who watches us on the regular knows, you know, while Spotify and streaming is kind of like going to a salad bar, so to say. I'm a big believer that you dedicate some of your hard-earned money to supporting artists, because art is really not free. I mean, you have to, you will not get from one town to another on the royalties from Spotify unless you're one of their top 2 artists. So please, you know, in the description below will be links so that you can purchase Simon's catalog. You can find the songs he was talking about to start with. You'll be able to buy the new album. But, you know, if you are in the area, support him. Go buy tickets to see him. Buy his merch. Buy his music. You're really going to enjoy it. You're good. If you love eclectic music that crosses genres, that is audibly sensational, and that intrigues your mind, I think you're going to be in for a real treat. So please support Simon. We kind of wrap these up with sharing, though, because I think it's important that we talk about, you know, although people are going to go and buy your music, who are you enjoying these days? Like, are there 2 or 3 artists that when you're not focused on your own music, that you're like, you know what, I'll give them a listen? You mentioned you don't really do streaming or the radio, but who are some artists that you're listening to that are kind of an earworm, so that if you're out on a walk, you're like, I'm going to enjoy my time with this artist or that artist?
That is such a hard question, because, as I was saying, I don't listen to radio. I don't browse Spotify. In actual fact, I'm one of these weird people that doesn't have music on in my house. You know, I just don't put it on. If I listen to an album, it's when I go to bed, or if I'm in the car and I want to hear something. The radio station I listen to 99% of the time in France when I'm driving to a gig is a thing called France Musique. And I can hear Schoenberg next to some jazz, next to some weird whatever. So I'm going to have to say, really difficult. Plus, I have a real memory problem. I mean, Chappell Roan, as I said, recently discovered. I haven't got anybody in my head at this point that I could recommend. What I will say is I totally agree. If you are somebody that listens to music and consumes music, and I probably don't fit that bill anymore, but if you are someone that listens to music and consumes music, yes, go out and buy it. And the thing to do, I think the most important thing to do, actually, and I've relearned that coming here to France, is support your local music scene. Because in England right now, I'm not living in England. I haven't lived in England for 7 years. England's music scene has suffered. It's died a death. It's died a death due to COVID. It's died a death due to greedy landlords putting up prices so clubs can't afford to survive. It's died a death because yuppies move into funky areas and complain about the loud music in the local pub. All those things have had a huge impact on music. Those venues were where I learned to play, to write, where I saw my friends play, where I learned everything about music, you know. And so I would say not just about buying music online, of course, download albums, but find a venue in your town. It's $3 or $5 to go and see a band you've never heard of. Take a chance. Just go and see them because you may be surprised. And even if you're not surprised, it might inspire you to do something. So please support local music. When I moved to Brittany, I was just so thrilled that I'm in the middle of nowhere. You have to drive 60 kilometers to get to a big city, you know. But 14 minutes from me, when I moved here, it's closed now. There's a blues club in a town of 1,000 people, you know, or less. There are clubs that do music. There are bars that do music in the middle of nowhere, and they're packed on a Friday and a Saturday. Okay, you don't have to pay to get in, but they're packed and people are buying beer. And you know what? We get paid properly for playing in those bars. The government of France supports bars putting music on. They subsidize it, and we all walk away with a decent wage from playing those bars. So keep music live is my message. Go out and see a band. Put $5 in the hat, buy their merch if they're there, and find what's out there because there's some great stuff out there.
No, absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, it's harder than ever to live a life as a musician or an artist with the fact that society has kind of demeaned the value of it through technology and things like that. So if you are passionate about music, if you support the arts, support these artists, go out and see them and enjoy the experience that you get communally when you're sitting next to people who are as impassioned as you are and enjoy the music. So Simon, I totally agree with you. I'm gonna say one last thing before we go because do you know you obviously share something with Phil Collins? Are you aware of that?
No.
He too was in a movie, Hard Day's Night, and can't seem to find himself in the crowd scene in the movie. So the two of you are cinematically kindred spirits. If you go out and you look, there's a lot of stories about that he was an extra in Hard Day's Night in the theater scene, and yet nobody's been able to find him, I think, except for one still image that was.
My one regret is that I wasn't really pushing hard to try and get into the new version. You know, I should have. If I had connections, and I don't, I really should have said, "Look, come on, guys! I was a musician working in LA, trying to play in the comedy store I played one night, and I was in your film. Let me in now as a kind of senior nobody, you know."
Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry you're not going to be in the new Spinal Tap. I think it comes out in the fall, but I think that's a great story, and go look that connection up. I mean, you both have been on film and not seen, so you share that similarity. This has been a fabulous hang, Simon. I appreciate it. Everybody, go out, support Simon, support your musicians. They really need it, and it's how they continue to bring you fabulous art. So I appreciate you joining us. If I'm in France, I'll be looking to figure out where I can go see you. If you're in France, go check out Simon. Go see one of his shows. Thank you for hanging with me, Simon, and everyone who's followed us along today. Thanks so much. Continue to share these with people. Let's get the word out about these great conversations. So until next time, thank you so much.
Thank you.